I never seen such desolation. I think we drove for a mile and there wasn't a building hardly standing.
Nobody knew what was going on. They called the situation fluid, but fluid means that nobody knew anything.
It was different. If I had done something else, I don't know what I would have done.
We're talking today with Mr. William VanLuyn of Grand Rapids, Michigan, and the interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Now, can you start us off by giving us some background on yourself? To begin with, where and when were you born?
I was born in Grand Rapids, Michigan, May 22nd, 1925.
Okay. And then did you grow up in Grand Rapids?
Yes, I almost lived my whole life practically in the northeast end.
All right. Now, what did your family do for a living when you were growing up?
My father had moved from New York to Grand Rapids to learn the furniture industry, furniture capital of the world and all. And so he worked at Imperial Furniture and Brower Furniture and some of the places until the Depression hit.
And then what happened?
He was out of work like everyone else and was pretty tough scraping along. I was young, but I can remember a lot of that. And anyway, he finally got on WPA, and I put in all kinds of, in fact, he worked at Riverside Park across from the Soldiers' Home, clearing all that out where all the ball diamonds and soccer fields are now. But that was just wilderness in there, you know.
Yeah, and the WPA didn't pay very much, did it?
No, I can't remember what it paid.
And
maybe $10 a week or $8. I don't really remember.
Right. Now, had he been just a worker or management, or what had he done before?
No, he was a worker. He learned to run all the machines. And in fact, when the Depression really got bad and Mr. Brower of Brower Furniture had to lay everybody else off, he kept my dad, who could run all the machines and so on and so forth. So he finished up any oddball orders that they had left. And when that was gone and no orders coming in, Mr. Brower asked my dad to be night watchman. He would be there during the day and my dad there at night. And I can remember going over with my dad as a little kid before he lost his car and staying there overnight, sleeping in a cot they had there. And he had to go around to different places to punch a time clock or something to show that he made the rounds.
Okay.
And then it got so bad, Mr. Brower asked him to help board up the windows. So it was right over at Ann and Turner. Railroad tracks are right there, and a lot of men riding the rails in. Good men, some were not, but a lot of them good men just looking for work wherever they could go. They didn't know, they knew their own town wasn't hiring, so they wanted to try some other place, and it was that way all over, you know.
So he stayed on, at least to some extent, with the furniture factory, sort of as long as they had something for him to do? Okay.
Helped board up the windows.
Yeah.
Then I don't know how much later it was after that. Mr. Brower stopped at our house and said he'd gotten a call from somebody in Gardner, Massachusetts, that needed a man could run all machines like my dad could. So my dad went there and worked, sent home his paycheck every week, got a little night job in a grocery store to pay for a room and his food. So that went on, I think, until my younger sister was ready to be born. I think then he came back.
Okay. Now, as you get closer to the war starting, were there more jobs again? Could he come back home?
Yes, you know, it was still Depression, actually. A lot of people don't think that, but it was Depression, I think, right until the war started.
Right.
And he was able to get a job at Metal Office Furniture, which later turned to Steelcase,
Right.
Same name. So he worked there, and he went on the second shift, and he could take the, I can't remember if it was streetcar or bus, if we still had streetcars or not. I remember streetcars, but I'm not sure. Anyway, he could take that to work, Century and Hall, from way out near Plainfield and Knapp.
Right.
And I got out of work at 2 a.m. in the morning, no transportation. So he walked all the way home from Century and Hall to 3 or 4 blocks beyond Plainfield and Knapp.
Wow.
In the wintertime, snow up, quite deep snow. And I guess we probably never appreciated him as much as we should have. We did appreciate him and loved him, but
Yeah.
what sacrificing some of the men did in those days.
That was a pretty long hike. All right. Now, as for yourself, did you finish high school?
Yeah, I went to Creston in those days. I came from the grade school, Aberdeen grade school, and in those days, you went to, at least at Creston, we went in the 7th grade. So there we are, 11, 12 years old, and looking up at these other students, some as big as your dad or bigger, you know. So you felt like a little ant, but we got along, and I liked sports, and as soon as I was old enough to get into sports, I did that. My parents didn't want me to play football because I had already broken my left elbow twice. And finally, they signed for me in the 10th grade, and I went out and played on the junior varsity. I fooled them. I broke my leg. So anyway, I ended up just playing basketball and baseball.
All right. Now, do you remember how you heard about Pearl Harbor?
Yeah, it was Sunday. I remember that, and we were home, and of course, no television. Somebody heard it on the radio and yelled, and we all gathered around. I remember laying on the floor in front of the radio, and folks, and I had 3 sisters, 2 older and 1 younger, and we were all very upset about that, you know.
Okay. Now, before that happened, had you been paying any attention to what was going on in the world? Because the war had been going on in Europe for a couple of years.
Yeah. No, not much. I'm probably like the kids are today, you know. That's a long ways away, and so I knew what was going on, but as far as reading the paper or anything, no.
Yeah.
And we had 2 papers in those days. The Herald came in the morning, and the Press in the evening, if you could afford them.
Right.
But they were available.
Right. So you really weren't worrying too much about it, or thinking you were going to go into the Army or into a war or anything like that. And then Pearl Harbor happens.
Yep.
All right. Now, at that point, did a lot of guys from your school who were old enough to just head off to enlist, or?
Some did, but I was just 16, so you know, it still seemed like a long ways away. But my oldest sisters, well, they weren't married then, but he was called in, I think, the 1st or 2nd draft. And everybody was hating to go at that time. Now, there were a few people that joined, you know, but not a lot of them. Some of them went up and joined the Canadian Air Force, and some joined our own service, but not a lot of them.
Okay.
Most of them had to go on the draft. I hated that.
Okay, so you're now finishing high school as the American War is going on. Now, did you figure you would go and enlist, or were you going to wait until they drafted you, or?
Well, turning 18, the 22nd of May, and graduating a week and a half later, and my draft notice was there. So I didn't have much, I didn't think about it much. I planned on going, but it happened so fast and automatically that I was involved.
Okay, so you got your draft notice in June. Now, what happened then when you reported for the physical?
We were sent to Detroit at that time. We went down there on trains. And I had a real bad eye. My vision in my left eye was practically nothing, 2400 vision. And so as soon as they checked my eyes, I was rejected. So some of us were rejected that come home on the train, and some of the guys that passed were crying because they passed. I was almost crying because I failed, you know, was rejected. But anyway, so after a week or two, another friend of mine he was rejected also, and so we went down to the draft board and talked to the woman in charge down there, and she says, well, you were just there, I can't send you again. And we said, yeah, you can. And she said, well, I'm not supposed to for 6 months. We says, there's a lot of guys who don't want to go. We're useless here. We just got out of high school, know nothing about defense work or anything. And so she said, well, I'll send you down to the next group, which she did. That took a little while, and then we had a hard time passing then, too. I had talked to some captain and explained to him that I had been hunting for quite a few years, and it was a good shot.
Mm-hmm.
And he's also against my better judgment, but we'll put you in limited service. You'll never go overseas. You'll probably have a desk job or training other troops or something. I said, well, okay. So finally got taken in October of 1943.
Okay. And then where did you report to first?
Right to Fort Custer here in Michigan.
Yeah.
Was only there a week or two, and they sent me to Fort Sheridan in Illinois for a week or two. And then also in Illinois, I was forwarded to Camp Ellis. That's where I took all my training,
Okay.
really.
What part of Illinois is Camp Ellis in, or what's it close to?
I think of the town of Peoria.
Yeah. Okay, so Peoria is the nearest town of
Yeah,
its size.
Peoria is probably 50, 60 miles away, but it's that in that area.
Okay,
yeah.
kind of north central Illinois, or
Yeah,
yeah.
maybe a little bit further south, I
Yeah.
guess. I don't know.
okay. And what kind of work did Camp Ellis specialize in for training? What were they doing there?
They were, of course, regular basic training for like anybody else would have, but we're training to build bridges,
Okay, so
roads, such.
so it's an engineer training
Yes.
camp essentially. Okay, now but you had regular basic training first.
Yes.
Okay, what did that consist of for you?
Well, it was rough, but I remember going out on the rifle range. That was one of the first things, and you had to qualify. There was expert was the best marksman, and sharpshooter was second best. That's what I ended up getting,
Mm-hmm.
and marksman was the lowest. And if you scored lower than that, you had to keep going back to the rifle range till
Mhm.
you got to be a better shot. I recall in Camp Ellis, Camp Ellis, we were shocked to see German prisoners. I had no idea there were any German prisoners in the U.S. And they were really crack Nazi troops. And they would go on different repair things and maintenance things, and always had guards. And I don't know how many of them there were. I probably saw 30 to 50
Mm-hmm.
at a time, and they did the goose step. I don't know if people nowadays know what that is, but the feet go way up high and the arms swing, and they did it in perfect order. They were sharp units. And when we were out on the rifle range, and when the group I was with finished firing, and then we were to go back, and another group would go up and fire at the targets, and they told us, get back out of the way, you're bothering the other shooters. So we went back, and just being out of high school, a lot of us, why we started wrestling, had to prove who was the toughest, and fooling around and everything. And one of the fellows in my outfit, his parents were German, and he spoke some German, understood more German than he spoke, and he heard these German prisoners who were doing maintenance work there talking about us. They said what terrible soldiers we were. We didn't know how to act, we didn't know how to march, we didn't know how to do anything. But they could not understand how we could shoot so straight.
Mm-hmm.
And of course we got a chuckle out of that.
All right. Now, when you went to Camp Ellis, now they were putting you right into an existing unit already, right?
Yes.
What unit were you joining?
Well, it was, I went in Company B
Of what unit?
of 1303rd Engineers, Company B,
Mm-hmm.
3rd Platoon. And most of the guys there had been there, like you said, the 4 or 5 months. And so there was no hopes of any of us just joining up then to get any kind of a rank. All the stripes were all given out to everyone.
Yeah.
There were
Hey,
none left.
I guess just for the record, I guess the official name of the regiment, because it's kind of law, it was sort of 1303rd Engineer General Service Regiment.
Yes.
So, big long thing. And what were they supposed to do? What's the purpose of a General Service Regiment in the Army?
Well, General Service, they called us out one day and said, "You're no longer in limited service." So we said, "Good, but we're still a General Service Regiment, so we will go overseas. We'll never be in the combat zone. We'll always be back, building hospitals and some roads and things, but all back, not near combat at all," which proved wrong.
Right. Okay, so you're assigned to a unit. It's already it's got most of its personnel already. You're filling out the ranks with ordinary enlisted men at this point. Now, how did they decide what company you went in?
Oh, they, being in the engineers and building things, bridges, carrying things, they did one thing right. They realized it was important that you'd be carrying something with somebody your size. So there was 6 companies, A, B, C, D, E, F, and then another company that was just made up of non-workers, you might say. And we were put in there by height. Company A was all men over 6 foot. I was 6 foot at the time, so I was in Company B. And Company F were little guys. Very tough, very strong, and very good soldiers, but they were all little. They got named the Mighty Midgets.
Let's see. Now, what happened when you played basketball?
Well, in the States, you mean? Well, yeah, I was in a basketball game. After all day basic training, then each company organized a basketball team. And we would play in the rec hall at night, and I was in good shape, and some of the other young guys, most of the other young guys were. And so I was on the Company B basketball team, and we played the other teams. And I remember one game I was playing, and of course we didn't really have uniforms. We had shorts, tennis shoes, sweat socks, and that was about it. And a couple of my friends come running in the rec hall and yelling at me, "Boy, you're supposed to be getting your overseas shots." And the medics are mad as hell because you're not down there. You're the only one in our company hasn't got them. And I looked at the coach, and he says, "Go." And so I put on, that time we had those great big overcoats. And they hung way down to here, so I put that on over my sweat-soaked body and run about 3 blocks through the snow. And I walked in there, and the medics were mad because I held them up a few minutes, I guess. And man, they hit me with 3 shots, one on each side at the same time, and then another one. And they said, "You're done." So I just turned around, and I lowered the overcoat, didn't take it off, put it back up, and ran back. And the coach saw me come in, and he said, "Go back in." So I just dropped my overcoat on the floor, and the other guy come out, and I went in. And as I think back now, it was amazing. I didn't have sore arms. I didn't have nausea, headache, or anything. And I compare it to now that it would kill me. I walk out to my mailbox now to get my mail. It's just at the end of my driveway. It's not that far. And in cold weather, I get back, I have chest pains, and
Yeah.
think I got it pretty rough.
Well,
I haven't.
You were a lot younger then.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Did Company A always win?
No, not always. They, well, there weren't as many tall men then as there are now. I mean, so you were playing against guys, probably nobody taller than 6'6", and some of them were only 6'1". No, they didn't always win. Like if you played, well, I don't think we never played Company F for some of the lower, because that was too much different.
Yeah.
They were in the 2nd Battalion. ABC was 1st Battalion of the regiment.
Right.
And DEF was 2nd Battalion. The other company was Headquarters Company, but they were all higher ups.
Right. Okay. About how long did you spend at Camp Ellis? Did you get there in a November?
We left in March. Left there in March to. I guess we got on a ship and we went out east to Boston
Mm-hmm.
and left Boston Harbor in March. I think it was.
March of '44 then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're Camp Ellis about 6 months or something
Yeah.
like that. Okay. Now, over the course of that time, were there things about your training that were different? Talk a little bit about the regimental commander and what he wanted you guys to do.
Well, he was a real GI officer. That's a word I'll use. And he wanted us to be, I think every commander wanted his outfit to be better than anybody else. And he started us, after our basic training, all day long, he started us taking 5-mile hikes at night. And that was kind of rough because we were tired from basic training, and naturally some of the older guys couldn't walk more than a mile or two. And some of the heavy set guys who were overweight, they had the same problem. And so they'd be dropping out and they couldn't go on, so they had trucks or ambulances following us. Well, these hikes became longer and longer and longer, 10 miles. And then the next one was a 30-mile, and we started that on a Saturday morning, of course, 30 miles. And we got back from that, and I don't think more than 30% of the men made it all the way then. And again, there were trucks and ambulances following, picking up everybody that passed out or fell out, whatever. So then the colonel had us fall out when we got back and said, next week is the big one. You know, we're going to go overseas, and most of you guys aren't coming back alive. And he said, however, if everybody walks every step of the next week's hike, I'll see that you get home at least for 3 days, no matter where you live. We'll add traveling time to you, but you'll be home 3 days if you make that hike. It's going to be 125-mile hike. Of course, we thought he had to be kidding. That's unheard of. Never heard of anybody doing that. But he wasn't kidding. So the next Saturday we started out, and each day got more brutal than the day before. I remember the very first night, we'd stop for 10-minute breaks. But the very first night, our cooks would go ahead and be in some field where we were supposed to be. And when we got there, they'd have coffee and food, so on and so forth. And the first night they said, well, stack your rifles and do what you want to do. Well, I didn't want coffee or anything else. I wanted to sleep, get off my feet. So in those days, everybody had a half a pup tent shelter in their pack or field pack. And you got that out and buttoned it up with another guy, and you crawled in there and went to sleep. And I think that was midnight. And a little after 1, why, somebody's kicking my feet. I guess they yelled at all of us, and nobody woke up. We were so tired. So they're kicking the bottom of your feet, which are sticking out of the pup tent a little bit. Get up and fall in. We're moving out. My God, you went to put your shoes on, and you couldn't. Those of us that could get them on couldn't lace them up. We tied them, but you couldn't pull them. I mean, your feet were all swollen up, blisters all over. Most of the guys were taking their jackknives or bayonets and slicing their shoes right from the toe right up to the top there to let it spread out. Anyway, that took 3.5 days. And that third day and that half of the fourth day, why, you were just walking on your senses, I guess, because your brain wasn't working. If somebody in front of you passed out, which was happening all the time, your brain wouldn't tell you to stop, and you'd fall over them, and then guys behind you would fall on you, and there'd be a pile of 8, 9, 10 men before somebody would yell halt, and you had enough brains to stop your feet because they were just automatically plodding along. So it was very bad. When we got back to camp, that wonderful colonel of ours made us fall out the next day and march around the camp to show everybody else what we had done. And everybody was limping and dragging ass and, excuse me, and things like that. It was not good. And then he ended up giving those of us certificates, which I cannot find, with his signature on, that we walked every step.
Mm-hmm.
And there weren't very many of us in our platoon, in any platoon, just a few of us that walked every step. And he ended up, which was good of him, letting everybody go home on a 3-day pass.
Mm-hmm.
And I was glad he did, but I thought what a damn fool I was for walking every step of the way. I didn't get any more benefit than they did, but I was glad that he did let everybody go, because everybody tried hard, and a lot of them just couldn't do it.
Mm-hmm. Now, aside from the times when you had these really long hikes, what was daily life like at Camp Ellis while you were there, particularly once you'd finished with basic?
Well, we were waiting for orders, and I recall one day that, well, many days, they didn't know just what to do. They were used to keeping us busy, so they'd send a sergeant around and yell, "Everybody fall out, we're going to police up the area." And this being 1st of March, the snow was still deep there. You know, it was like a foot of snow, and it was very cold. And I recall one day walking along the walkway that was shoveled to our barracks, and there was a package of Lucky Strike. I still remember Lucky Strike cigarette package frozen under the ice, and it was white. And prior to the war, Lucky Strike was in a green package, and there was a saying on Lucky Strike, "Green has gone to war." So here's this package frozen under the ice about 2 inches, and I just walked by it, and the sergeant, not my own sergeant, says to me, "Soldier, pick up that pack of cigarettes." And I just laughed at him and thinking he was joking, and he says, "I'm not joking, pick that up." And I says, "Show me how, I can't, it's under 2 inches of ice." And he said, "That's an order. Pick that up or I'll court-martial you." And I says, "I can't, show me how and I'll do it." Well, it kind of blew over, and I didn't get court-martialed, and that was the end of that. But I didn't like him after that, because he kind of tried to pick on me, and I in turn picked on him the rest of the time in his service. Bugged him a little bit, got back even at him.
So, I mean, what kinds of pranks did people play in your unit, or what could they do to each other?
Well, he always pulled pranks on each other. We had a boy from India, well, he was probably 30, that slept in the top bunk, and he was a real sound sleeper. And one Sunday, we lifted his bunk right off the bunk below, and we opened the double doors on the barracks, and we carried him out, set him right out in the middle of the parade ground. The snow was deep, and we set him down really gentle, and then we all quietly went back to the barracks and watched out the windows, and pretty quickly pulling the blankets up higher and then over his head, and then pretty quickly throws them back and sets up and looks, and of course he's all surrounded with snow in the middle of the fair or the parade grounds. And oh boy, he started cussing at us. So we went back out there and we picked his bunk back up. We didn't make him get out in the snow. We carried it back, set it right back where it was. And of course then he laughed like the devil. He thought that was great. But boy, he was madder than hell just before that. So such things as that. There were other things with guys going on leaves, but I don't think I should get into a lot of that. I don't know.
All right. Now, I mean, on the whole, did you kind of enjoy that 6 months? Was it sort of?
Some of it I did, yeah. Some of it I did. I think we had men in our outfit from like 39 different states. And so you got to meet some really nice people and some scumbags, you know,
Mm-hmm.
there's just all kinds of people.
Right.
But yeah, I made some good friends and enjoyed them. I enjoyed the rifle range and some of the things that we did. I had a scare. They first assigned me to be a rifle grenadier. Oh, what's a rifle grenadier? You know, I didn't know. So actually, you fired a rocket like you would out of a bazooka, about that long and about that big around. And so they took my new M1 rifle away from me and gave me a World War I 03. They call it. It was bolt action, and to fire this rocket, there was an attachment went on my rifle, and I had blank cartridges, 30 caliber, no
bullet,
no lead in there, and so you put them in and slam that bolt down, and then you'd take aim as best you could. And there was an old tank out there on the grounds for our training, and would fire that rocket at that, and you had to loft it quite a bit. Well, it scared the devil out of me because the gunpowder come back when in my right eye, and being blind in my left eye, I thought, boy, this is not good. So I went to the officer or the sergeant, I can't remember who I went to, somebody with authority, and said, I don't think I better do that. I can't see out of this eye, and the powder each time I fired it burns all around my eye, and come back and it was all red, irritated. And he says, no, you're right. So I was no longer a rifle grenadier, and I was glad of that. So I got my M1 back.
All right. Now, did you have any other sort of more specialized training, or were you just some guy who did whatever job was out there?
Well, I was more or less considered, I guess, a carpenter, bridge carpenter, you know, rough carpenter.
Okay.
Not a carpenter for anything finished, but so I on the bridges, there were different kind of bridges. There was a Bailey bridge that went together in sections. I think that was really an English bridge, and the sections weighed an absolute ton, and it would take 4 men to carry these. They were about this wide and probably 6-7 foot tall, I guess, and I'm thinking 6 or 8 foot long. Well, they're all iron. I don't know how much they weighed, but we had what we called idiot sticks. They're about this long, and you'd hang on here and slide it through, and there'd be a guy there, and up front there'd be 2 other guys, and you'd lift it to get it up, put it in place, and they'd fit right together very good, make good strong bridge. They would sag from weight, but they didn't come apart. So we learned to build those, and then regular wooden fixed bridges, and we worked on pontoon bridges. Some of them were metal pontoon bridges, some were the big rubber donut oval type things. So that kind of things, and repairing roads and so on and so forth.
Okay. All right. So you did get to go home before they shipped you overseas. So what was that like?
Well, it was great to get home. I remember we were trying to take a bus, and we had to wait a long time for a bus, and I was so anxious to get home. And I don't think I ever told anybody this, but we got into Chicago, and we weren't going to be able to catch a bus for several hours. Boy, our time was so valuable, that 3 days, and what he said, probably be the last time you ever see your parents and your loved ones. And I never stole a thing in my life. But I remember looking at cars to see if there were keys in there. If there was, a couple of my buddies and I would have stolen a car and driven to Grand Rapids and deserted it. I hate to admit that, but we wanted to get home, see our family, you know.
But as it was, you wound up with taking the bus? Or?
Yeah, we had to wait for the bus, and lost 3 hours or whatever it was, but it was okay, you know. And everybody was, you know, glad to see. Of course, I didn't, and I don't think the other guys either told their folks, might be the last time I see you, but in your heart, you felt that to your girlfriend and your friends and whoever you saw. You know.
Sure. All right. And then you go back again to Camp Ellis, and then they ship you out. How do they get you from Camp Ellis up to Boston?
We went by train. Yeah, we went by train, and We weren't there very long. I think some of us got to go to town the next evening for a couple of hours, and then we were back to the dock and loaded on the ship the next day, and we were on our way, and that was, I don't know if you want me to go into that yet or not.
Yeah, sure.
Well, that had always been a person that got motion sickness extremely easy. And I felt so bad for my poor mother when I was even a little kid, you know, 4 or 5 years old, living out in the northeast end of Grand Rapids. If we took a streetcar downtown, I hardly would ever get all the way down there, and trying to get one back, my mother would have to pull that cord and we'd have to get off wherever, because she'd watch me and could tell when I was ready to throw up, and just get off the back door of that streetcar and right in the gutter of the street. That's where I'd throw up every time, and we'd have to walk the rest of the way. So getting on a ship to go overseas, I was not looking forward to that. I couldn't ride in the back seat of a car or anything either, and so that took us 14 days, and I got so weak throwing up, I couldn't eat anything. I lived off a few crackers and a little bit of Coke that the guys would bring me. And anyway, each day I got sicker and sicker and sicker, and I lost a lot of weight, got very weak, and 14 days was a long time. So I don't know how many days we were out at sea, and we were zigzagging because of the German U-boats.
Right. Now, were you sailing with a convoy or by yourself?
Yeah, we were in a convoy. I don't know how many ships. When it was rough, you'd see the other ships disappear, you know.
Yeah.
And anyway, it didn't have to be rough for me to get sick, but that made it worse.
Right.
Yeah.
What kind of ship were you on?
It was a USS Argentina. And it had been I guess a cruise ship, apparently, converted over.
Okay.
And it bounced all over the place. And like I said, I got so sick and weak. And so after so many days out, well, the first night out, I was put on guard duty. And I was sick then, but I wasn't so weak. And anyway, I was to guard this door. I was to be out on the deck and guard this door so nobody would come out. I went on at midnight. And so most guys were sleeping, but anyway, I went out there, and boy, there was a terrible, terrible storm. The waves were bashing, and the boat was bouncing all over, and the waves were coming up there, and so I knew I had to hang on or I was going to get washed over. So instead of going over to the railing where you'd look out, I was back against the bulkhead here, hanging on to a pipe railing there as best I could. Pretty quick, the waves and the wind and everything was taking my feet off from under me, and I thought, I got to get inside. I'm going to get washed overboard. Now, no officer of the day, no sergeant of the guard, no one come around or did anything. I mean, you're on your own. So I went inside and got my back against that door so nobody could go out there. And the next day, I remember when I got off duty there, I went and got in my sack, and the next duty I was telling some of my buddies about it, and they said, show us where you were. So I did. And we opened that door and looked out, and there was a big life raft on the outer railing, and the whole bottom of that was broke right out of there. So if I had stayed out there probably another half hour, I'd have probably been feed for the sharks, you know. But I thought that was pretty bad. But I remember when the guard relieved me, I told him, I said, do not go out there. You get washed over. Lean against this door. So anyway, then as the trip went on, I got more weak. And after, I don't know how many days, 6, 7, 8 days, they had a fire drill. We didn't know for sure it was a fire drill, but we thought it was. And so everybody was to get out on deck. And we knew where we were supposed to be. And so I said to the guys, I can't make it. I'm so weak. And just go ahead, and they won't miss me. I'm back here. I was way back against the bulkhead on the bottom, and I said, nobody will know I'm here. Well, the guys all went up there, the outfit, and they always called roll call, and I didn't think about that. And when they called VanLuyn, you're supposed to answer first name, middle initial, William J., and the guys would have done it, but they're so close to the officers, right in front of them, they didn't dare. So the major realized, said, "Where is that man?" Well, one of the guys said, "He's so sick he can't make it up here." He says, "You two go down and get him." So they come down and said, "You got to come up. The major, they all know you're not here, and you got to come up." So they helped me, and it was a long walk and a lot of steps, climbing and everything. And so they got me up and stepped through the watertight doors, and there's probably an 8-foot space, and then there's other watertight doors, and then you're out on the deck. And so I got out there and got in place where I should be, and the colonel or the major took one look at me and says, "Soldier, where's your life jacket?" I thought, oh my God, I forgot it. I was using it for a pillow. So he says, "Go back down and get it. If we got hit by a torpedo or we caught fire, we'd all be jumping in the ocean, and you wouldn't have a chance without your life jacket." So I went back down there, and I was exhausted when I got back down, so I laid on my bunk for a while and finally sat up and got my life jacket on and tried to work my way up, and I had to stop a couple times to rest. And when I got back to these watertight doors, I stepped through the first set, and Major Gonzalez is coming through the second set. We come face to face, and he said, "I was just coming down to see where you were." And right then I was very sick again, and I put my hand over my mouth, trying not to throw up, and I tried to push him out of the way to go around him and get out the other airtight doors and over to the deck, and he had more to say to me, and he stepped in front of me and held me up, and I couldn't hold it. I threw up all over his suntan shirt and pants. And I couldn't even apologize. I was too sick to talk, and he said, "Soldier, you really are sick." And I just went, And he helped me through the other watertight doors, and here that he's all wet, with no solid, but all wet. And anyway, he never held it against me. He knew I couldn't help it. But as we went on, then being young, I'd seen so many movies of war movies, and guys getting off ships, climbing down the net, and being right in the middle of the war, and I thought, certainly that's what would happen to us. Not being dumb and young and not knowing anything. And finally, I thought, how am I going to do that? I'm so weak. I can't carry my field pack, my combat pack, and my rifle and all this. God, we pulled into, I think it was Greenock, Scotland, in the harbor. And here's the Scottish Red Cross with donuts and coffee. So I was very, very relieved that we weren't getting off the ship in the middle of a battle.
All right. So now they bring you into Scotland. Then what did they do with you once you arrive?
We weren't there very long. They gave us coffee and donuts, and they put us on a train, and they took us into England. And I think we went to Southampton, is what it sticks in my... No, Southampton was on the coast. We went to Northampton, further into England.
All right. And then, so you're arriving there. This is sort of like late April or whatever of 44. What kind of assignment did you get once you arrived there?
Well, we put up tents. I think they were 6 or 8 man tents. We're just out in the middle of a field. And my name was called, and a couple other fellas. And so the 3 of us fell out, and they said, "Come on, get in the weapons carrier," I guess it was, or a Jeep. We'll take you over and show you what your assignment's going to be. We had no idea what it was, and they took us over, I don't know, not far away, maybe a mile, maybe not a mile, and we got out, and here's a big cement mixer there, and they said, "You 3 are going to be feeding the cement into the cement mixer. And I looked at the size of that, you know, I'm thinking of a cement mixer like you'd use to put on a garage slab or something. And this is a great big thing. And they said there's going to be small bulldozers pushing in dirt and gravel. We'll have water running into there. And the limey trucks are going to pull up here loaded with bags of cement. And they weigh 111 pounds. I think they maybe weigh, I don't know what they weigh here, maybe 100. But anyway, they're heavier there by at least 11 pounds. And you will unload those trucks. You go there and get the bag on your shoulder. Probably one of you will be in the truck pushing the bags out, and the other two will be alternating, going back and forth to this area here. And here's a spot about 2 foot square, and it's open, kind of a wood platform there. And there's a sharp blade that probably stuck up, probably about like that. And said, you'll get those bags and you'll slam it on that blade to rip it open, and you hang on the bottom corners, and the cement's got to go down in there, and there's this big 8-inch auger turning. And I like to compare that to young people's great-grandmother or grandmother that had a food chopper that they clamped on the countertop to make bologna and, and pickles, and turn that, and, you know, if you got your finger in there, it'd take it off in a second. Well, here's a big 8-inch one, and I thought, my God, if our foot goes down in there, you know, it'll pull you right in, and maybe cut your leg off, or maybe pull your whole body in there. And so we're just standing there looking at it, and these other two guys are all, they're like 24 years old guys, and they're, you know, developed, and I'm a skinny kid, and I gained most of my weight back from being sick on the ship, but I probably only weighed 150 at the most. You know, and they're 190-pound guys. So why I was picked to work with them, I don't know, but anyway, maybe that Sergeant Valentine that wanted me to pick up that cigarette package. So the next day we had to report there, and there was one English truck pulled up there, and they started the machine, the cement machine, and the bulldozer started. Boy, that was hard work. And you're walking in sand, you know, uneven, kind of down a little hill. And so we got where we were doing pretty good. And that went on for, I think, about a week and a half. And the idea of that was to get the cement, because in that area were barrels of mustard gas that the British had. And if the Germans used it in World War II like they did in World War I, we would retaliate and do the same thing. So there are many, many barrels of mustard gas. And it was a bomb dump there. Bombs were stacked up all over the place. And just further into the wooded area, there was such great tree coverage there that you couldn't go in there and look up and see the sky any place. So they knew airplanes, German airplanes, couldn't see down there. So we were to put like a garage floor here and then here all through this winding thing. So that's what they needed the concrete for. We found that out. So we worked at that for like a week and a half, and every time we'd go back, we had cement powder all stuck all over us, all over our clothes too. And one day, the good colonel come along that made us go on the hikes and all that. And he said, you know, you men, there's mustard gas in these drums. If one started leaking, you'd have to put your gas masks on. So I want you to put your gas masks on and work with them the rest of the day, with them on. Well, we're soaking wet with sweat. We got all this cement powder stuck all over us. All you could see was our eyes and our nose and our mouth. We look at each other and, you know, we look like zombies or something. So he stands right there, his hands on his hips, you know, and he had this little, I don't know what you called it, you know, what an officer that tried to act important had, you know, tap things.
Right.
And so he stood there looking at us, so we get our gas masks out. We had them, but we weren't wearing them. So we put them on. Well, the minute we put them on, the eyeglasses were steam. We couldn't see each other as close as you and I are. We could not see each other. And we knew the truck was over here and there's big holes here with that auger going. And so he says, now make sure that you don't let any of those bags fall in there and ruin that cement. I don't think he gave a damn if we fell in there and got chopped up and ended up in the cement, but that's the way he was.
So what did you actually do? If you couldn't see and you're
Well-
trying to do this work and he's standing there watching you?
We all kind of walked over by the truck and started reaching for that, and he walked away.
Mhm.
We weren't sure, so we're pulling him down, trying to look and see, is he gone, you know. So we took him off, and they were all soaking wet with sweat and crap all over them. So we just took him off and threw him on the side there, and he was gone. So thank God he didn't stay there, because, well, I wouldn't have walked over to that opening where that auger was, because it would have sucked you in.
Yeah. All right. Now, what did your unit do in terms of helping prepare for the D-Day landings? Because those were coming up pretty quickly.
We, most of the outfit didn't do anything special for that, but some of us were called out for that too, and we didn't know what we were being called out for. And said we're going to go on detached service. So, fine. So they loaded us on some trucks and took us, I don't know how far away we went, a few hours drive anyway. And we got off. There were airfields there, and we soon found out that we were going to do everything we could for the airborne, the 82nd and the 101st. And these paratroopers were getting ready for D-Day.
Mm-hmm.
And they were highly trained men and officers, and and also the pilots. They flew C-47s, twin-engine plane, and come D-Day, of course, they were practicing taking off with 2 gliders and turning the gliders loose and ready for D-Day for that. So anyway, the so-called pathfinders were officers, I guess, and the pilots, the glider pilots and the plane pilots. And so some of our guys had to build sandboxes in a building, a good-sized sandboxes, probably 8 foot square, and with sides on, put sides on, and then they brought sand in, and then they had all kind of little, they looked like little toy houses and barns and lakes and roads and churches, a lot of churches over there, you know, in Europe. Just all kinds of things, trees, and they put those in certain places. They knew where to put them because they had photographs of Omaha and Utah Beach.
Mm-hmm.
So, excuse me.
Mm-hmm. Did you also do things like, did you do anything in terms of helping to load the aircraft or move things around, or were you just kind of picking up after them?
Yeah, we didn't do much on that. I was put in charge of a little warehouse for food.
Mm-hmm.
So the mess sergeant would come out every day and give me a list of what he wanted for the next day. So I had a pretty good job.
Mm-hmm.
I could open a can of fruit cocktail once in a while and eat that. It was almost all canned goods.
Mm-hmm.
And and I wasn't in on that building the sandboxes or anything like that. But the ones that were, after that was all set and it was set up just the way they wanted it, and they brought in a whole bunch of men. I don't mean all paratroopers, but a bunch of the leaders, and they locked them in there, and our guys put barbed wire fencing around there. And they had orders, anybody that tried to get in there or get out of there, shoot to kill. So they had more exciting than I did, although nothing really took place there. Right. And we went on and fed the guys and drew their KP, some of them did, and some of them guard duty and everything. So they didn't have anything to do except concentrate on the D-Day.
Mm-hmm.
So we knew when, we could tell by the anxiety and everything that was going on when D-Day was going to be, and we all thought it was going to be on June 5th.
Mm-hmm.
And then when it turned out to be 6, we thought, well, we missed by 1 day. Well, then come to find out they really were slated for June 5th. But due to weather conditions and so on. But anyway, then we hung around there for, I don't know how long, 2-3 weeks, I believe. Policed the area, took down some buildings and did things like that. Got to go into Nottingham on some passes, and that was a nice, fun town, and rode the double-decker buses in there, and was usually a woman conductor on there that taught us all the dirty songs of the war, of the soldiers, British soldiers and ours too, you know. Yeah.
So in general, I mean, how did the civilians in town, how did they act toward the American soldiers?
Not real good. You realize some of our Air Force had been over there quite a long time before we got there.
Mm-hmm.
And there were things that I will not talk about, but we were cautioned to turn our back on some of the things that we saw and not get into scrapes. Not so much with the British soldiers, but with our own.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, the girls were friendly, but their parents were not very friendly as I would have been had I been in their place, you know.
Okay.
We spoke with a couple of girls. I remember they came and talked to us. First day I went into Nottingham, and they were both at that time working in defense work. And they were from different parts of England. One was from Nottingham area. I don't know where the other one said she was from. And they worked side by side, and they said it took about 2-3 days before they could understand each other. So, you know, they're kind of like us with somebody with a real southern drawl, or somebody out with an eastern accent, or us in Michigan who think we don't have any accents. But, yeah.
All right. And now so you're there for a few more weeks, and then you go back and you return to your regiment.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And then once you rejoin them, then what happens?
Well, then it wasn't long, and we were sent to Southampton, which was a holding area to go across the channel.
Mm-hmm.
And they had bomb shelters built right in there and everything. And the first night, I remember the Germans had what they called buzz bombs. There's probably another name for it.
Yeah,
but
the V1, yeah.
Okay, that's what I knew it as, a buzz bomb. And I don't know if they put a limited amount of fuel in them or the motors on them were set to stop. But anyway, they were unmanned, and when they tried to get them where they get over their targets in England, and the motor would stop and down they'd come. Well, you could hear them. You could hear them. And the British would try to shoot them down. They had those big spotlights like you see in the movies. Well, they really did have them over in England. Huge, powerful spotlights. So they tried to shoot them down before they came down and did damage to the cities. Well, anyway, the first night we were there, a couple of them come over and in the middle of the night, and we were woken up by the air raid sirens, which were different than ours. They were a real sickening, whining sound. And boy, I remember we barreled out. Boy, we're down those bomb shelters until they sounded the all clear. So we went back and got in our army cots again. We're in the tents. And I don't know how much later, probably an hour or two later, was the same thing. Boy, we rolled out of there again. Quick got in those shelters. And again, the bombs come down, but they were quite a ways from us. We could hear the explosion, but figure, they're missing us by 3/4 of a mile, you know. So the third time, why, the air raid sirens went off again, and we sat up, and I said, screw it. We laid back down. and went back to sleep. And I guess nobody knew we were in the tents because nobody came and chewed our butts, you know. But that was stupid on our part, you know, so stupid. The bombs hit again, we heard them, but again, they were not close to us. We thought that we were their target, and I think we were, but they were missing us, and I don't know just where they hit, because the next day, I guess we were on the HMS the Duke of Wellington, crossing the channel, and we did go down nets on that when we got near Omaha Beach and got into LCIs, which are the steel ships at the front folds down, landing craft infantry they call them. And we didn't get shot at right on the beach. We got shot at after we got up the hill, and mainly at night, I guess, is when we were attacked pretty bad by the German Luftwaffe, German Air Force. They strafed and bombed us, but nothing like the poor guys that were in there.
Right. Now, about when do you think you actually got into Normandy?
I think it was later in July.
Now, once.
Maybe at least the middle of July, maybe the third week, along in that.
All right. So it's around the time when the Americans are starting to push around Saint-Lô and push toward breaking out of Normandy.
Yes.
All right. Now,
That's true.
when you first got there, what kind of work did they have you doing? Or were you just waiting?
Well, I think the very first thing that I saw, this doesn't work, but I remember seeing a small building, so a couple other, my buddies and I thought we better check it out. So we pulled the door open, didn't know if there were still some Germans in there or not. It was just a small one-room concrete building, pillbox, if you may. And we yanked it open, and there was a dead German in there. And I said, look, he captured one of our what am I trying to say? It shoots the rockets, I can't think.
Okay, a bazooka?
Bazooka. He had one of our bazookas. One of them took a better look. I said, that's not our bazooka. My God, they got bazookas too. But they probably had them long before we did. We probably copied them as we did everything else that they had. We copied their tanks and just almost everything. So that was the first big upset to me, to see they had bazookas. I was naive enough to think we were the only ones that had things like that. Well, anyway, then we repaired some roads that were bombed out, and I think we got in the town, or near the town of Toul, France, and we built a bridge.
Okay. Well, Toul is in northeastern France. That would be a while later.
Probably. See, I'm mixed up on where I was and what happened.
Because you basically, you come into Normandy, and originally that's sort of the hedgerow country, and,
Yes, it is.
and that's where the infantry are fighting.
Yes, they
And
are.
so you're initially repairing roads and so forth. Then late July, early August, the Americans attack, and they break through the German lines.
Yes.
They go through Avranches and then out and around there.
Geez, we pronounced it, yeah.
Yeah. And what, at that point now, are you moving and following Patton, or what are you doing?
Yes, by then we were in the Patton's Third Army, yes. Once we hit Normandy, that's what we were in. And yeah, we were following along and repairing whatever we could. And we built a lot of bridges. I have a slip down there that tells how many feet of bridges we built. And in that book, Patton's Fighting Bridge Builders, it tells more about them and how many feet above the water and how, all the details. But anyway, I can't remember where we built our first bridge, but the first one we built, we thought it was fine. The tanks and everything were moving over it, and it was raining, a lot of rain then, and the rivers flooded so bad that they overflowed the banks. In some cases, there were canals next to the river where it became a massive, massive wide river. And anyway, with all that water going up behind all business and everything, all the empty wine barrels that were stored behind all the cafes and everything all become floating down the river, as well as big tree branches and logs and everything. All this got building up against our first bridge,
Mm-hmm.
and the water was high where it was almost up to the I-beams, and all that force, all that stuff backing up. Finally it tipped our bridge over and fell right downstream in the river.
Right.
We were able to get the I-beams and some of the lumber out of there. We rebuilt it quite a bit higher, and after that we built them all
Mm-hmm.
quite a bit higher. Learned a lesson.
Okay. Now, so you're basically, you're working around kind of the Rhine area for a while in the area of the breakout, and then moving across northern France toward northeastern France, kind of following Patton. Now, as you're doing this, now, did you ever come under fire from the Germans, or just occasional air attacks, or?
Yes, both. All the way through, this happened many times where we would get up to a bridge site, and the Germans, as they retreated, would always blow the bridge up.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they'd drop one section into the water, sometimes the whole bridge would be useless. And then what they would do, they'd retreat to the other side, and they'd usually set up some of their 88s, which was their military cannons,
Mhm.
so to speak. And they were old, but they were accurate. So lots of times before we got to the bridge, they'd fire a shot or two into that bridge site,
Mm-hmm.
not to damage the bridge worse, but so when we arrived, they'd fire on us.
Mm-hmm.
So shrapnel would be flying all over the place. So we didn't have an awful lot of men killed, but it was not fun trying to rebuild something with them firing on you, you know.
So when that happened to you, you approach the bridge, they start shooting. Now, do you deploy into some kind of combat formation, or do you wait for someone else to come up and help? Or?
Well, sometimes both, but we'd try to get word back, and I guess our officers somehow could get
Mhm.
word back for the artillery or the Air Force to come
Mhm.
in and knock that out of there, so we
Right.
could go ahead and, because the last thing Patton wanted was for his tanks setting
Mhm.
still. I mean, he didn't want them setting still at any time, so he wanted us to get those bridges done. Our worry, when we got word back that they had to come up and knock those guns out, was always if our artillery shot, it didn't fall short on
Mhm.
us, that it carried over the river. Well, you know, you aren't always talking a great distance. And the same with our planes coming in to strafe or to dive bomb them, you know, that, because an awful lot of men, as in the wars that are going on
Mhm.
now, are killed by enemy fire.
Or friendly fire. Yeah.
Friendly fire.
Right.
I mean friendly fire.
Yeah.
Misspoke, rather than enemy fire. A lot of them were, you know, killed friendly fire.
Did you ever see anything of Patton himself?
I did. We were building a bridge in a small area, and it was just my platoon there. The rest of the company was working on another bridge, and we had the I-beams across, and we had part of the decking on, the flooring. We usually, like if the bridge was like this, we'd have the decking laid like this, and then the top decking be laid on the other
Mhm.
angle. And we didn't have it all the way across, even the bottom decking, and all of a sudden the Jeep pulled up, and God, we looked over, and here's General Patton sitting. He's the passenger, but he's got the 30 caliber in front of him. And he jumps out, and he's got his ivory handle pistols on,
Mhm.
which he almost always had. And so he walked right up to us, and he says, "Man, I got to get across this bridge." We said, "Well, we got some more planking to put across there, General." He says, "Come on, give me a hand." So he grabbed he grabbed the board and a couple of the boards, and somebody got on the other end. We got over and just laid it. We didn't try to nail it down. And I looked at those pearl handle revolvers, or ivory, they weren't pearled. And I want to say, can I see one of your revolvers? And if I said that, he probably would have taken out and shot me. Not really, not really, but I didn't dare say that. But I mean, I was as close as we are, you
Yep.
know. I'm admiring those revolvers more than I am him, I guess. But anyway, he jumped in the Jeep and says, thanks a lot, man, and away he went. So that was the only time I really saw him.
Now, did you ever hear any of his big speeches or whatever, or go to any kind of event where he was there and talking to you?
No. No, just that's the only time that I saw him. I knew about him slapping some soldier, but I was not present. I
Right.
didn't see it or.
Oh yeah, that was back in Sicily or whatever.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Now I'm going to go back here to your story. You're in France, and you kind of as you're crossing France. I don't know, how much did you see of the civilian population as you were going? Did you encounter them very much?
Yeah, you did. I remember one bridge we were building, and our Air Force had dropped pamphlets or something to warn the people to get out of that particular area because they knew there was a stronghold of German soldiers there, and we were going to have to bomb it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think most of the people temporarily left, but some didn't, as in hurricanes or tornadoes now, you know. And they went down the basement, and a building right close to the bridge site where we were starting to build a bridge, or we're going to build a bridge, had been bombed, and there were quite a few people in there that were killed. And fortunately, the building was down on them who were in the cellar. And I remember us telling the Frenchmen that they had to get those people out of there. The odor was unbearable. It had rained some too. And I remember the mayor, or whatever he was, coming up there with some men, and they all drank and got drunk, and they started doing their job. And I guess they got them out of there, but by then we had the bridge rebuilt, and we're gone. You know. But there was I was guarding one bridge. When we'd finish the bridges, lots of times we'd have to guard them because the MPs weren't up there, you know. And so we'd have to guard them till they got the MPs up there. And I was on one end of the bridge and one soldier on the other end, and the rest of our outfit had moved on, and we were to guard it till the MPs got there. I thought they'd be there in 4 or 5 hours. And it was dusk, and we'd tell the Frenchmen that they had to be off the street before dark, or we would think they were the enemy and we'd shoot to kill. And gosh, just one night it was dusk. It wasn't dark, I could see, but it was close to turning. And I see a figure coming across the bridge. I didn't hear any conversation on the other end, so I raised my rifle, took safety off, and yelled halt, and the person stopped, and then there was a woman. Female voice says, don't shoot me. I'm a teacher in the French school, and I teach English, I speak English, you know, don't shoot me. And I said, come forth, you know, be recognized. And she did, and so she showed me her credentials, which looked good to me, and I wasn't in Germany yet, it was in France. So I said, okay, how far do you have to get home? And she says, what is all that on the ground? Well, I had cut I still have a scar here. I had sharpened a knife that day, and I had cut myself pretty bad of all the dumb things to do. And I couldn't stop the bleeding, and so I'd taken the toilet paper out of my K ration and kept putting it on there, and it wouldn't stop, and when it gets soaked, I'd throw it down and take some more. So she saw that blood there, and so I showed her my hand. Oh, she said, I come back, you know. and bandage. I said, no, no, it's almost dark. Do not come back. You'll get shot. She says, I come back, don't shoot. So she did, and she bandaged it up for me. But again, I heard somebody and ready to shoot them, you know, because they told us the German paratroopers were going to come and blow that bridge up. So we were expecting the enemy. Well, anyway, she bandaged it up, and I said, get home as fast as you can. And I prayed that nobody would shoot her.
Right.
I thought she did that for me, risked her life.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm standing there praying, and I didn't hear any gunshots, and so I guess she got home okay.
Were there sometimes problems with women who wanted to get too friendly and get your guys into trouble, or did you not encounter
Well,
much of that?
I personally didn't.
Right.
I really and truly didn't, because we were moving so fast, you know. But yeah, there were guys that did, and there were guys that did get into trouble, you
Right.
know. Like I say, I behaved myself pretty good, and I'm not just saying that for my kid's sake or anybody. I just did, you know.
Oh, yeah.
But
But you were aware of it, or it was going
yeah.
on sometimes, sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Now, you had another incident in your written account where you mentioned being in a French town and having to bring heavy equipment through an old part of the town,
Yeah.
and that created some problems because you couldn't get it through.
This is
Can you
true.
talk about that?
This is very true. We were to rebuild a bridge, rebuild a bridge, I guess. And I don't recall what town it was in France. And we knew we needed a crane, even though we could blow some of the sections out that they had dropped into the river. We needed a crane to lay the new I-beams.
Mm-hmm.
So we got the crane, and as we approached, we realized that we couldn't get down the main street of this little town. They had a home on one side where they lived, built right up to the street,
Mm-hmm.
and they had a building, a sort of portion of the building that went across, and it was a walkway over into a business they owned on the other side of the
Right.
street. And so the sergeant said to me, they'll take a couple men and go down there and tell those people we have to take that section off.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they had bedrooms up there, and then they could walk right across. Explained to them we have to take that off to get our crane down there to get that bridge built. And so I thought, my God, how are we going to do this? So I took a couple guys with me, and we went down there. None of us spoke French. So we rapped on the door, and a woman came to the door, and so we tried to explain. So then she turned around, yelled in the house, and more people come out, men and women, and so we're trying to tell her we got to cut it off here, and we got to go over there and cut it off there, and that'll no longer be there.
Mm-hmm.
And of course they couldn't believe what they thought, they were misunderstanding us. So finally I had motioned for we had a truck that had an air compressor on it and had big saw, it'd be like a big chainsaw. It was on that order. Chainsaws weren't common then like we think now. And so I called for that to come up. And so I told him, I says, go upstairs and lock the door. And go over there and lock the door, because this is coming off. And they're crying, you know, and everything. And so I got that saw, and we started, and I thought, I can't do this. This end will fall, and it'll be wedged in there, and it'll fall on us anyway. So I called for the crane to come closer. We chained around the middle of it so he could get a hold of it and hold it in place.
Mm-hmm.
So we sawed off this side. We went over and sawed off, and we had long crowbars, and we got it all off, and the crane backed up, set it off to the side over there. And those people, I know they hated me. And we did it as neatly as we could and everything, but I mean, after all that, been there probably for years and years and years. All those buildings were old. And I made the statement later on that I thought President Bush wasn't the only one that the French hated.
Right.
I think they hated me at the time. Probably they didn't know anything about President Bush then. But later on, I did receive accommodation from the ambassador to France. He was here in Grand Rapids and awarded some of us a certificate,
Right.
which I have hanging on my wall at home, for being in the invasion and freeing France from
Right.
the Germans.
But you probably didn't bring up the incident where you had to remove a part of a building. You didn't tell them about that.
No, not everybody, no. I didn't tell the ambassador.
Yeah.
No, heck no.
All right.
No, not at all.
Okay. Now, once you move across northern France, I mean, the campaign bogs down for a while. There's German fortifications around Metz and in the Saar and things like that. So there's probably a couple of months when you're not moving so much.
True,
And then there, you're just kind of building roads and bridges and just building stuff up.
yeah.
Okay. And then the Battle of the Bulge starts in December. And then what do you guys do at that time?
Well, just days before it started, we were in Luxembourg. And we were in a wooded area. And there was a building back there where we were. I can't remember who all, if it's couldn't have been my whole company in there, I don't think. Although, maybe it was my company, but certainly not anybody else other than our company. And we were in there, and we walked through this woods, and we went down to a town down there, whose name I can't think of right now. The name I can't think of. And while down there was one of our army trucks come along and was loaded with cans of these 5-gallon, we call them jerry cans. They're 5-gallon cans of gas, because the Germans had them just like that. And the driver stopped and asked where to go, where some outfit was he had to deliver the gas to, and told him, and just as he went to pull away, I saw smoke coming out of the back of his truck. So I yelled, "Stop, stop, stop." And he stopped, and I ran up there and I said, "You better get out of your truck's on fire." And he thought I was kidding. And I said, "No, there's smoke coming out of all those gas cans." And he still thought I was kidding, And so I grabbed him and I said, come on, get out. Shut it off. So he shut it off and he got out to look, and he's, "God, there is." I says, "Absolutely." So I said, "We've got to get any civilians or anybody back from here, because it's going to start blowing up." He says, "Yeah, I will." So he's telling the people to get back. I'm telling the people to get back, and a couple of my buddies, and we got them all back. And then we're standing there waiting. We know by then there's flames. And just then one of my corporals come running up, and he says, Where's the driver? Where's the driver?" And he says, "He's right here." He says, "Well, we got to get him out of the truck." And I says, "He's out of the truck. He's right here. This is the driver." Well, anyway, he keeps mouthing off a little bit, and they started to blow, so everybody got back further yet. So they wouldn't blow it all night long, I guess. So we went back to our outfit, climbed up that hill, walked through that woods, and Corporal Peterson went and told our officers how he had saved this driver. He'd been down there, run through the flames, risked his own life, pulled that driver out of the truck, and dragged him back to safety. So he got the Soldier's Medal or Silver Star and got promoted to sergeant for that. But anyway, the funny part, well, it wasn't funny. The sad part was that we moved out. The Battle of Bulge started right then. And we moved up, and other troops came and moved in that same area where we were. And I don't know if it was from us walking through the woods, because we were there a couple of days, or just what, the snow got packed on or what. But unbeknown to us, the Germans had put a lot of shoe mines all through that wood.
Oh.
And we walked over them, never went off. This next outfit come in, and they weren't there even a day, and they're walking over, and the guys are getting their feet and legs blown off. And they got word up to us, why didn't we either get the mines out of there or warn them or caution them, or we didn't know it.
Yeah.
And here a lot of guys lost their feet and legs, you know, and we felt really bad, but that was that.
Right.
By then we're involved in the Battle of the Bulge, and you know, you just forget.
Okay. So what were you doing during the Battle of the Bulge then? What was your job?
Well, again, we started out repairing some roads, main supply routes, so-called, so we could keep getting ammunition and gas and everything else up to the infantry.
Right.
They were the ones that were really in it. And then as the Germans fought back, and then we pushed them back, and some places, you know, they were fought through 3 different times. And right where we were, there wasn't a stump of a tree standing more than 3 foot high. I mean, from the shelling, there just wasn't. And I remember when we thought they were coming back again, while we were used as infantry, told us to dig in, and I dug a foxhole just deep enough to lay in. I didn't think I had time to get any deeper. And a half-track come and pulled right up behind me, and he's going to fire right over my head. And I thought, I want to get off to the side a little bit, so I gave up my foxhole and went and dug another one, so he wasn't firing right over. You know, I mean, he's firing pretty good-sized shells.
Yep.
And so anyway, I got over there, and they never did reach me back there. But they had been there, because like I say, there was nothing standing that high, but I never fired a shot right there. And we went on then, and I don't know if it was a couple of days later, we'd push, our infantry had pushed them further away, and we're walking through the woods, still ready to shoot, you know. And I heard some voices. I stopped and I listened. I thought, what the heck? I could hear voices again. I could tell it was up ahead a little bit. So I walked up there, listened, and it was female voices. And so I yelled something and heard them talking, but I couldn't understand them, speaking German. So I said, a couple guys, come on, let's clear this off. There's somebody's under here. And it's women. It could be men too, but I heard women voices. So we started with pulling all this heavy stuff off there. And finally we get down to where we can open a trap door, and there's 2 women crouched down in there. It's a small space, about 6 foot square. And they'd been down there, all these bullets and tanks and everything, howitzers and all kind of shells flying all over the place, and they stayed right, just like I said a little while ago. People won't leave their hurricane areas, they'll stay there till they die. Well, here they are.
Now, was this just a cellar or a bomb shelter? Or?
Just a little cellar.
Okay.
But they'd collapsed, and I guess it put quite a bit of strength above them, and trees laying on it and everything else. So we freed them, and they come out of there, and honest to God, you would have thought we were their long lost sons or husbands or something. They're hugging us and thanking us, and here we just killed a bunch of their soldiers, you know, and we were their enemy, but we saved their lives because they could never have gotten out of there, not ever.
Were you in Germany at that point, or you maybe still in Luxembourg?
Yeah, we were in Germany.
Okay.
Yes. Well, no. Yeah, I think we were in Germany by then. Yeah, we had to be out of Luxembourg and into Germany. We had all the places I was, Scotland, England, France, Luxembourg, Belgium, Germany, and I was sent across the Danube into Austria, and back into Germany, and retraced my steps later on, which I haven't gotten to.
All right. So you're still, but sort of during the Bulge, you're still doing pretty much the same kind of thing you were doing on the Advance. You're repairing roads, bridges, this
Yep,
kind of stuff. Now, were there times, either in the Bulge or after that going into Germany, where you wound up out in front or ahead of your support?
And there were a couple of times when we were supposed to be the left flank of the Third Army.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a time when when we were moving up again, and our officers read the maps wrong, or got confused, didn't know where our tanks were. But the tanks were usually out ahead, infantry right behind them. And here we're in these trucks, and we're sailing along pretty fast. And all of a sudden, we spotted some tanks ahead of us in the same area we are. And I realized they're buttoned up. Normally you'd see the tanks and there's one guy up looking around and everything. No, they're buttoned up, so they're expecting to get shot at by heavy shells any second. And they're at 100-yard intervals. There's 10 of them.
Mm-hmm.
Well, instead of us stopping and realizing we're in the wrong place, we went right by them. I thought, oh my God, what are we doing? Our weapons carrier was first, leading with our officers in, and then the trucks, a couple jeeps, then the trucks. And we went right by these tanks, and I know they thought we were absolutely idiots, which we were. And anybody should have known that we shouldn't be passing tanks when they're buttoned up. But anyway, the weapons carrier got up there and got crossfire machine gun on them and went down the ditch. I guess it tipped over. And some of them got wounded. Nobody got killed.
Mm-hmm.
But we lost the weapons carrier and our maps and a lot of things like that. Thank God for the tanks were there, because the first tank opened fire on them,
Mm-hmm.
knocked them out right away, instantly. One shell to each of them and they were gone.
Mm-hmm.
But that was just stupidity.
Right.
I thinking of one thing. All the times we travel quite often in trucks, because we had equipment too. And when you had to relieve yourself, you had to go stand by the tailgate of the truck.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the tailgate of the truck wasn't much higher than that from your chute.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're standing there, and there were seats on each side, guys sitting there. They get their hands in your pants and your belt, one on each side. And so you're unbuttoning your pants and taking a leak. And you're on bumpy roads, and I mean, it was scary, because if one of them let go, you were gone, You fell on your head out of the truck. But you did that, you got used to it, but you never enjoyed it. And we weren't doing it for the entertainment of the French or the German or the Luxembourg or the Belgian people. Of course, there's always people walking along the roads, if you weren't right in the shooting area at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
So they're looking at you, and here you are standing there taking a leak, But that was life.
Right. All right. Now, what do you think, what were the largest bridges that you built? Did you bridge the Rhine or the Danube? Or?
Yeah, the largest was definitely the Rhine. One day I was with a couple other guys scouting in a Jeep, and we were headed toward the Rhine, although we were still quite a few miles from it. And God, there was an awful explosion, and so I figured, well, they're shelling us. And we all jumped out of the Jeep and rolled down in the ditch, and we laid there, and we didn't hear another incoming shell or anything. So I crawled up on the road, and there was a bank on this side. So I crawled up the bank, looked over, and there we had a great big, it was a brand new gun. I think they called it a 440. It's so long ago I can't remember for sure what it was. It was the biggest gun that we had ever made, and it was huge. And that's what we heard fire, and they're firing 22 miles across the Rhine River. And we thought it was a shell come in. It was such a horrendous explosion. So I motioned to the guys, and so we all went up there, and we got up there and says, geez, we thought we were being shot at. It was you guys. Did you just fire? Yeah, we did. So we're talking to them, and he says, and they're getting orders back. Sometimes we had like little planes flying over. They were unarmed, just reconnaissance planes looking for things. So they were calling back, telling them where the shell hit and where they wanted it to hit. So they're adjusting the guns a little bit. So it's a huge thing, huge. And they had it all dug into the ground and sandbagged and everything to try and hold it so much concussion. So they said, we're going to fire another one. We got orders to fire another one. Hold your ears and get back a little ways. And they all had these kind of earplugs on. So they fired, and right after they fired, there's a farmhouse, 100 or more yards away, slate roof. And when they fired, all these slates are sliding off the roof, and we could hear them falling on others that had already fallen off and breaking, you know. And I looked at the roof, and it's about a third open then. And I figured another 3 or 4 shots, and there's not going to be one slate on that roof. But that was the least of our worries. But then when they fired, there must have been no breeze at that moment. Well, first of all, they had 4 men carrying like a trough, hollow thing about that long. 2 men on this side, 2 men on this side with handles sticking out. They carried a 100-pound bag of powder, gunpowder. They put that in the breech, push that in. Then they come with another 10-pound bag and put that there. Well, first of all, they'd put the shell in. I failed to mention that. And it took 4 men to carry the shell. Great big thing. They slid it in there. Then 2 men carried the 100-pound bag of gunpowder, and 1 man carried the 10-pound bag of gunpowder. They slammed that closed, and tightened her up. And they fired that, and a smoke ring come out of there. It was just perfect, and it kept getting larger and larger and larger because there was no wind apparently that day. And it got as big, like 10 by 10, and it was rolling. All sides that were rolling, it was just, they probably never happened again. It was perfect. But they were shooting across the Rhine River, and I think the Rhine was 20 miles away at that time.
All right. And then once you got there then?
The American soldiers had already crossed on that bridge that the Germans failed to blow up.
Right.
So we went upstream from that and started, they wanted us to build a big bridge because that wouldn't carry too much traffic across there, the one that was intact. So we started on that, and I think it only took us 17 days. Now, this is unbelievable when I think of it now, but the colonel wrote that and sent each one of us one. I got it shortly after I was out of the war and home. And it was 55 feet high, so ships could go under it.
Right.
And I don't remember how long it was, but I think in 17 days we built that bridge.
Now, what kind of bridge was it? Were you?
It was all wood trestle, Of course, we had to throw in a lot of rock and stone to anchor the uprights. And I remember of course, we double-decked that too. And after we got that built, and of course, we were gone out of there, but the vehicles our American vehicles were rolling over there at 8,000 a day. And I think of all those bridges we built, and I wonder how many, if any, are still standing. Probably not that particular one because it was built so high.
Yeah.
But some of the lower ones that were probably stronger, though that was built strong, but it's a lot of years.
Yeah.
I remember our food wasn't catching up with us very good then, and we were pulling hand grenade, pulling the pin and tossing them in the water, and when they'd explode and kill the fish, stun them, we'd go get the fish, and we ate fish for supper that night.
All right. Now, as you got past the Rhine and moved into Germany, was the going getting easier or faster, or was there still fighting going on?
It was fast. It was mighty fast. We didn't, we didn't get a chance to even keep ourselves clean. And you think, well, my God, you're by a river all the time, but you're working, and sometimes you work day and night, and you just you didn't have time to take care of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And we get strafed a lot on those bridges, especially at night. Sometimes if the Patton's tanks were he thought they were going to be standing, he'd say, keep working until those bridges are done.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't see him personally, he'd send messages
Right.
to our officers, but so we'd work into the night. Well, to work into the night, you had to have lights. So they'd turn on the truck lights, and they had some kind of floodlights too,
Mhm.
sometimes that they'd use. Well, as I describe it, if you turn on your front porch light, how long does it take before you got bugs all over it? Well, this is the way. Germans were always around you.
Mm-hmm.
So when you turned on those lights, you didn't always get rifle fire or even artillery fire, but they'd call their planes.
Mm-hmm.
They'd send planes in, and half the time they should turn their motors off. So we would send men out on each end of the bridge, and if they heard any enemy coming, tanks,
Mm-hmm.
troops, planes, artillery, anything, they were to fire 3 shots in the air. Well, we'd be so busy pounding boards, doing all the things that we did to build a bridge, we wouldn't hear them.
Mm-hmm.
And so the first thing usually we'd hear, these planes would spot us from up there, the Luftwaffe, and they'd turn off their engines and they'd glide in on us. And they would come probably closer than they thought than they intended to. Sometimes they'd be so terribly close to you. And they'd open up with their machine guns and their motors at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, bullets, tracer bullets, and bombs and everything else are flying at you at all times. They got your attention pretty
Mm-hmm.
good.
Now, did they manage to do much damage, or did they mostly miss?
They mostly missed, believe it or not. They would come close, and we'd scatter best
Mhm.
we could, and they quite often they'd miss. Later in the war, unbeknown to us again, the Germans, I said, always seemed to have better equipment. They had jet planes,
Mhm.
and we didn't know there was such a thing.
Yeah.
And,
But you didn't encounter those yourself, as far as you know.
jet plane?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, one day only. We were working on a bridge, and it was daylight, and we had the bridge across, but we were still putting some decking on or curbing on. Sometimes you put curbing on, you were putting a 6x6 or 8x8. So if a truck tire hit it, it would bounce them off rather than have them go to the side,
Mhm.
because there weren't railings really. And so anyway, we were working on this bridge, and all of a sudden, coming down the river, we heard this noise, but by the time we heard it, it was past us.
Mhm.
And it opened, it was a German plane, opened up with machine guns and dropped bombs, and we watched. The river was quite straight there, and the bombs hit way down the river, half, 3/4 of a mile. And his machine gun bullets too. Well, what the hell was that, going that fast? Well, we didn't know even what to call it, see?
Mm-hmm.
So he turned around, he come back, and did the same thing, fired on us again, missed us. And we scattered, we all run. So he must have went back and got more bombs, more ammunition. And a couple hours later, we're still out there working, and here he comes again. Captain yells, scatter. Boy, we scattered, And again, he missed us by so
Mhm.
much. So we figured, well, whatever it is, some super fast plane, and he must not have a bomb sight, except from a regular
Right.
prop plane, and it's not working for him, and his own imagination is not working for him either. So when he came the 4th time, 3 or 4 of us stood out there and gave him the finger. The captain would yell scatter, and everybody else scattered, but a couple of us smart asses, 18-year-old kids. I guess we were probably 19 by then. And he missed us by a mile, but boy, did we catch hell. Captain was so mad at us. He laced us out good, you know, really, really gave us hell. So we never did that again.
Okay. Now, were there other incidents where you got really close to the enemy or actually in combat, or have you kind of given us sort of the closest shaves here already?
Yeah, there were, like I say, we got shot. We didn't do much shooting. We got shot at more
Yeah.
than we did shooting. We were near Bayreuth, Germany. That's where Richard Wagner, the German composer.
Right.
We actually stayed in his music hall. And the first night there, the Germans always seemed to know where the Americans were. You know, naturally they were placed and were moving, coming toward them. So I was outside, and a German plane come over, strafing and bombing, and I saw a trailer. Wasn't very far, 20 foot away from me, so I ran. I crawled into that trailer, and he come back another time, and he was gone. So I crawled out. Oh, well, that wasn't too bad. Didn't hear anybody yelling they got hit or anything. And I looked at that trailer, and gee, it was full of our dynamite and our TNT. And so I picked the dumbest place in the world to take cover. But anyway, he missed it, and I was fine, you know. The next day, we captured a couple Germans. I was with a couple guys, and we were kind of out scouting, and I looked, and here come a couple of Germans through the brush. Well, they didn't see us, so we put our rifles on them, and when they looked our way and they're looking down the barrel of 3 rifles, they dropped theirs and yelled, "Comrade, comrade, comrade." They knew that word really easy. So we motioned for them to come, and they did. And so we took them back in there near the music hall in Bayreuth. And we didn't have very good toilet facilities, I remember that. And I was slated to dig a slit trench at night for the latrine. So I thought, I'm not digging that slit trench. These good, big German, healthy soldiers. So I said to the other guys, go ahead and take those prisoners in to the captain. They'll probably send them back some prisoner of war camp, which we had built prisoner of war camps too. And I said, I'm going to keep this one for a while. You tell the captain I'll bring him another hour or two. So I went and got a shovel, handed him a shovel, told him to start digging. And he naturally thought I was telling him to dig his own grave. And I let him think that for a couple minutes, and I said, no, you know, this wide and this long, not for you, not for you, you know. I said, but I'll shoot you if you try to run. So he dug, I told him, showed him how I wanted to dig it. He dug the slit trench, and then I turned him in, and boy, thank you, thank you, thank you. He could say that a lot of times, you know. But then we took other prisoners and so on and so forth. But I guess I remember that special because he thought I was going to make him dig his own grave.
Now, were the German prisoners you saw, were they mostly like you, kind of been about the same age and good shape, or were any older or younger? Or?
As the war went on, I'd say they got younger. What I really felt bad about, sometimes we took what we thought were German prisoners, and a lot of them were Polish. That the Germans had put into slave camps or whatever, and when we started moving really fast and they knew we were getting the upper hand, they put put these guys in the German army, put German uniforms on them,
Wow.
probably gave them an empty rifle,
Mm-hmm.
and made them go out in front of the Germans. Well, these poor people, what a position they were in. If they didn't go toward us, they got shot in the back by the Germans that were forcing them. If they came toward us, we were going to shoot them. So a lot of them threw up their hands before you pulled the trigger or something, and so you took quite a few Polish prisoners,
Mm-hmm.
and they're trying to tell you, we knew they weren't speaking German, but you didn't dare trust anybody.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't dare trust anybody. They talk about little kids now trusting in that. Well, the Germans taught the little kids, you know, how bad we were, supposedly. We stayed in many schools because they usually had a big concrete wall around them.
Mm-hmm.
On a lot of these concrete walls out in the playground, they had the silhouette of a German soldier, and they had the potato masher. They were wooden, they weren't real
Mhm.
potato mashers, but same shape, same size, same weight. So they stand out at the playground and throw at these German silhouettes of German soldiers on the wall. So you didn't really dare trust a kid then either, for fear he'd toss a hand grenade at you or into your Jeep or whatever it may be. And that's the way you did with the even these Polish fellas. You were pretty sure they were okay, and you felt your heartache for them, but you couldn't trust them.
Mm-hmm.
You had to treat them like they were your enemy.
Now, did you encounter any of the prison camps or labor camps or things like that?
Yeah, we did. We built some of the stockades. One place we moved up in trucks, and we saw what didn't look right to us just before we got to a town, and there was a bulldozer sitting there, German bulldozer, and we could see a lot of dirt pushed up all along there, so we thought we better go over, and it didn't look right, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So we checked it out, and just beyond that was a Folsom prison camp.
Flossenburg, was that it?
Flossenburg, I
Yeah.
guess that's the way you say it. That's the way you say it, yeah. And the Germans had a bunch of, I guess, Jews and
Mm-hmm.
Polish and whatever they had, all the different French and different ones they had in there too. It wasn't one so notorious as some of the others,
Yeah.
but they did the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And when they knew we were coming, they marched them all out there. They dug this trench with the bulldozer. They had them stand on the side of the trench, and apparently they machine gunned them down. The bullets, the force of the bullets, knocked most of them backwards into the trench, but not all of them, and some arms and legs were sticking out, and
Mm-hmm.
it was not a very good sight to see. And the German soldiers that also, they had lye, I guess, and they threw lye on them
Mm-hmm.
to try to eat the flesh off the bones, I guess.
Yeah, tried to cover it up.
And but see, we got there so fast that they didn't get a chance to cover them up or push the rest of the bodies in the ditch. And
Mm-hmm.
so the bulldozer sat in there, they'd shut it off, that was about all, and they ran out.
Mm-hmm.
So we went into that little town, and we had a fellow in our outfit, Henry Dobrin was his name, and he was Jewish, and he had been, he was a German Jew, he'd been in Germany, and he was a young boy, probably 14 years old, and he saw his whole family get assassinated by the Nazis, and somehow he escaped,
Mm-hmm.
and he got to the United States, and he was in my outfit. And I didn't like the guy really well, but he was valuable to us
Mhm.
because every town we'd get into, one of our officers would take him to the Burgermeister, who was a German mayor,
Mm-hmm.
take him to the Burgermeister of the town. A lot of these towns were small. I'm not talking Berlin or
Yeah,
a huge
yeah.
town. And tell him get the word around really fast that we wanted every weapon, every knife, more than 6-inch blade, a butcher knife or sword or shotgun or handgun or rifle or anything, turned into him by like 10 o'clock the next morning, or we were going to burn their town down. Well, Henry, he hated him so. I mean, he could tell him, there was no doubt about what he meant. I mean, he really wanted to do it, which we wouldn't have done. But we got all these weapons. We'd get them on dump trucks. We'd take them out and dump them in the river. We wanted to, you wanted to keep Lugers and all kinds of things for yourself, but you kept those a little while, and it wasn't worth it to you. You threw them away. But anyway, we were told a couple days later that General Patton had some of his high officials, high officers, go into that town and put people on trucks and haul them out there. The German show them what their sons and brothers and all of them did. They said, no, they wouldn't do it. Yeah, come and look. Here's what they did. So that was, I think they must have known some of that was going on, but they denied it to the nth degree.
Now, where were you when the war with Germany ended? Where had you gotten to?
We were in Passau, Germany, and that's where we went after we crossed the Danube and built the Rhine and built a big bridge there. And then we got into Passau, Germany, and that was kind of our home base for a while. And we stayed in a hotel that apparently we had bombed one end off it, but the rest of it was really nice, And we thought we were in heaven. We had twin beds, 2 men in a room. My God, we thought we were died and gone to heaven. And I have something kind of funny to tell about that hotel. That's okay. A couple of things. Well, anyway, we were there for probably a week and a half. And geez, we had a little leisure time to ourselves, and everything seemed wonderful. The war was slowing down. The war was still on. And one day, I was with a couple of my friends. Were standing in the hall, and here come a woman. We're up on the second floor, and here come a woman, all dressed up, beautiful clothes, and a guy with her in a uniform, not a army uniform, and she had a great big, I forgot what kind of dog it was now, a beautiful, big, expensive dog. And she come marching right up to us and telling us to get out of her hotel. And we said, no. She says, this is my hotel. And I said, no, it's my hotel. You get out of here, and you stay out of here until we leave here. And boy, she was mad. And so she tried to stick that big dog onto me, because I was talking back to her. And I don't think the dog, I think the dog was a nice dog. I don't think it would, but she was trying to get him. So I pulled out the .32 I had, held it by the dog's head. I said, you get out of here, your dog and her butler or bodyguard or chauffeur, or I think all in one.
Yeah.
He was scared to death. But she wasn't. Boy, she was gutsy. So anyway, she left, and I said, we'll be out of here in a week or two, and then your hotel. Now it's my hotel. So anyway, we got orders to leave, only my platoon, across the Danube River, which was only like a city block or two from where we were. And we were going to cross there and go over into Austria and to build a small bridge there that we had blown out, or the Germans had probably blown out. And so we were living pretty good in a hotel. There was a bar there, and we tapped a keg of beer. And I got to back up just a hair. In the rooms we were in, there were twin beds in there, and next to each bed there was a bed stand. And then if you open the door of this bed stand, there was a thunder mug in there. that before there were inside bathrooms, people used that, especially in the middle of the night, to relieve themselves. So, but there were bathrooms in the hotel that were probably put in later, but the thunder jugs were still down there. Well, one of my friends, I think he was from Toledo, Ohio. He was a crazy nut anyway, and the day we were leaving, we decided to take this keg of beer we had just tapped on the truck with us. We weren't going to leave that beer behind. There were other barrels the other guys could tap. So this fellow Lou, he had quite a bit to drink already, and so when we loaded on the truck, lo and behold, he gets on the truck, fills this this I can't think of the real name of them, thunder mug that people have been relieving themselves in for years and years, and he fills it with beer, and when we pull away, he's drinking out of this thing, and I say it didn't make Lou sick at all, but it made me sick just the thought of, I don't know if he even rinsed it out, you know, he was a crazy nut. Anyway, across the Danube River we went, and up to where this bridge site was, and things got kind of exciting up there. We stayed in went to a little town, they called it Rotten Egg. We call it Rotten Egg, and stayed in a cafe which was right next to the street, and that was really, there wasn't much there. It was mainly a few houses and the river and the bridge, and we were there for a few days, probably 4 days or so, and it was there that one of the Austrian farmers come running up to me and says, "You're President Kaput." And I said, "President Roosevelt?" "Yeah, President Roosevelt Kaput." And he had died, and he was really worried, and he tried to tell me that all the Austrians and everybody were really worried because they didn't know who would take Roosevelt's place. They thought Roosevelt was a fair leader, you know, and would treat them with dignity and so on and so forth. Maybe not soldiers, but at least them, you know. And so they were highly concerned about how they would be treated. Well, anyway, we went ahead and worked at that bridge, and the people that owned the cafe that we were in lived in a house behind it, and there was a guy there that he looked German, looked real healthy. He wasn't in uniform, and I thought he's a deserter. And I remember going over and I grabbed him by the throat and pushed him against a tree, and I said, "You're one of the SOBs that were in the Luftwaffe that bombed New York, aren't you?" And he says, just pamphlets, just pamphlets." But all the prisoners that were back in Camp Ellis, those German prisoners, they were all told that they had bombed Chicago and New York, and they couldn't figure out how we rebuilt New York so fast. They didn't see any damage. But that was part of Hitler's propaganda machine, you know?
Right.
Anyway, if I go on there, there was just so few of us there in that cafe that we just had one guard out in front and one in back. And a friend of mine, Bob, I won't use his last name, he had saw a German officer on this motorcycle. And Bob pointed his rifle at him, told him to halt. And he halted, and Bob told him to get his butt off that motorcycle and walk. Wherever he was going, Bob took his motorcycle. And it was a BMW. I didn't know they made motorcycles, but they made motorcycles like they do cars. And so Bob took that, and he walked down from the cafe, maybe 100 yards, and put it in brush there and covered it over with brush. So Bob came to me and he said, "Bill," he said, "I talked with an Austrian farmer today, and he seemed like a good, honest man, and he'd like us to come visit him. Said he had 2 beautiful daughters. And you want to go with me?" And I said, Heck yeah. So that evening, once it got dark, Bob motioned for me, so I went out the back door, and I guess he went out the front. We walked down the road and uncovered the BMW motorcycle, and we didn't take our helmets or even our rifles. And so it was a real bright moonlight night, and so we got on the motorcycle and started down the road. We didn't think the Lieutenant Mosley would hear it, and so we went on down the road a ways. Instead of turning left to go to the bridge, Bob turned right, and we went down a dirt road. That road was paved we were on. We went down a dirt road and went down there a ways and turned left onto a farmer's lane, just a two-tracker with grass in the middle. And we could see okay. We didn't have any light on or anything, but it was so bright out. And boy, I'm looking over Bob's shoulder, and I thought, Bob, I said, here come some German soldiers coming right at us. He said, oh my God. And I said, don't stop. By the time we get turned around on this two-track, I know they'd fill us full of lead. I said, just keep going. That's all we can do. So as we got quite close to them, or we were already fairly close to them, they kind of separated, and we didn't have helmets. We didn't have our rifles. I don't think they knew we were Americans or soldiers or anything. And they kind of separated, and I thought later I could have went like this and high-fived everyone. Went right down between the middle of two columns. Oh my God, our heart was pounding, you know. And we got on down past them, and then Bob turned off, and there were a couple houses, and sure enough, when we turned off, why, this Austrian farmer come out greeting us, and Bob says, yeah, it's my friend. So we went in, and we no more and got in there, and they had all the relatives. I don't know how many, if they all lived in that house, or there were some neighbors, but grandma and grandpas and older people and younger kids, and 2 or 3 couple that looked about the same age as this farmer. And we come up the steps, because underneath I think they had animals, and we went on up the steps into the, I guess, kitchen, and everybody there looked, and they all went like that at me, and they're all talking real fast, and they're pointing to me, and so I pulled that 32 out and said, back against the wall, you know. And Bob says, Bill, what the hell are you doing? I said, they think I'm somebody else. You know, there's like 40 people here. They're going to jump us and kill us. No, he said, Bob could understand a little. And he said, they're talking how white your teeth are. And I said, well, they're all pointing at me. I thought they thought I'd done something to one of their daughters or something. You know, I didn't know. Well, then they all started, the people were all crying by then, thought I was going to kill them, and I ruined a romantic evening, I think. And so then we didn't stay too long, you know. We stayed and talked a little while, but they were all shook up. And I was shook up from just coming through those Germans.
Yeah.
That's why I did that too, you know. So I said, we better get back. I thought, oh my God, what if they're bedding down in that farmer's lane? We'll have to go by them again. You know, once you can do that, I don't think it'll happen second time where we'll be able to do it. But we went back, didn't have any trouble. A couple nights later, we bought a radio from that hotel. And so the radio was playing, and they announced on there, the war isn't really over, but the lights are going on in Paris and London for the first time in, 5-6 years, you know. And people are dancing in the streets, and I thought, great, and we're all yelling. I'm standing guard duty just outside the front door. Boy, a machine gun opened up down the road, and I fell flat on, and I could hear the bullets zinging over my head. I thought, why don't somebody tell those SOBs the war is nearly over? You know, quit shooting at us. But anyway, I didn't get hit, and a day or so later we went on back, and back across the Danube into Passau. And my brother-in-law found me there. He was a master sergeant in the field artillery. He maybe was his outfit firing over our head, I don't know. And the war ended anyway in the meantime, and then he come back. So that was maybe a couple weeks later.
Mm-hmm.
And so he says, "I want to take you back to my outfit. We haven't seen each other in, several years." I was
Mhm.
16 when he went in the Army.
Yeah.
But I think we went overseas about the same time, and we were near each other. We knew we were, but we didn't correspond, but we'd correspond with my sister and my folks.
Mm-hmm.
Well, anyway, he took me back, saw my first sergeant, and he says, "Yeah, go ahead. Be back in 3 days." So I did. Well, he had all his buddies looking for trucks with my number,
Mhm.
1303rd, on it, and I'd been looking for his, which was 943rd Field Artillery. We never saw them, and they never saw us, but all his buddies, knew of me
Mhm.
and were looking for me. So when I got back there, well, his brother was in the same outfit with him,
Mm-hmm.
his older brother. So he was the first one to greet me, and all those other guys, they treated me like I was a king, And they're all older guys,
Mhm.
older than I was anyway. But they treated me wonderful, and I stayed there for 2-3 days, and then he brought me back.
Okay. Now your unit didn't stay on too long in Germany once the Germans surrendered.
That's true. We organized ball teams in each company, and we played a little baseball. They got some gloves shipped to us some way, and balls and bats, and we made some ball fields outside of town because we had the equipment, and built backstops, and so we played each team and just made the rounds of each team, and our colonel had us fall out, said, "I got a message," and he said, "General Patton is very, very proud of us. And we've got 5 battle stars for the major battles, and we don't even know anybody else that's got 5 battle stars, even infantry, because we were always where the trouble was and the
Mhm.
big things. I didn't elaborate on that, but we were. And so he said, General Patton said we'd be the first outfit of our kind to go home. And you guys that don't have enough points might not get out, but we'll be going back
Mm-hmm.
to the U.S. And boy, we were elated, great. So anyway, just a few days later, he wanted everybody to fall out and talk to us again. The colonel says, "What I told you the other day still holds true. However, we're going the long way around." And, what does he mean? What does he mean? He said, General MacArthur is getting ready to invade Japan, and he wants more troops over there with experience, and we're going to go the long way around. We're going to go through the Panama Canal and on the Rock of Gibraltar, and we're going to go on an invasion of Japan. And that wasn't good. So I really felt bad for the the married men,
Mm-hmm.
because they knew they wouldn't make it. I think we all thought we wouldn't, but anyway, those guys really had it tough. Some of them had kids. So anyway, they took us back by rail, back to Marseille, France, and it took quite a while to get back there because the railroad tracks were all blown up. And we'd go so far and then there'd be no tracks, so we'd have to wait until the Frenchmen got there, and or Germans, whatever country we were in at the time, and fixed the tracks so we could get over that place, and we'd roll again. It was a bad experience there. Behind all these cars with us on were our kitchen cars, where our cooks were from each company. So about the last 6 cars were probably all cooks and field stoves and things like that. And they'd prepare what meals they could while we were rolling. We didn't roll too fast because the tracks were bad. And anyway, pardon me, the one day we heard yelling behind us. We leaned out. We had 2x4 nailed across the open door on each side. We leaned out and looked back, and they're yelling, "They're on fire back there. Tell them that, send word to stop." Well, the engine was way, you know, there's a lot of cars between us. So we yelled at the car in front of us, and by the time it got up there, I think it was the end car was on fire and burning badly. Well, the two cooks that were in there jumped out. One jumped out on the railroad tracks next to us as the train was going, and the second one jumped, but he didn't look ahead, and there was a big post there, and he jumped right into the post, and he was a goner, and I guess the other guy was practically dead. So they finally got the train stopped and uncoupled that car before the next one caught fire, and so we went on, but they had straw on the floor for us. We slept on that straw, but there was so many of us in each car, there wasn't room for everybody to lay down at once. So we weren't treated too good, but and we were down, going another invasion. We thought, oh boy.
All right. I'm going to suggest here that we've been going here for past 2 hours, and there's a whole other piece of your story left.
There is,
Would you
yes.
be willing to come back for a second session on a later date?
Sure.
Finish
sure
it
will.
there. In that case, I think we'll kind of close this session out here, and we'll talk about rescheduling.
Okay.
All right.
That'd be fine, Doctor.
Okay.
I never seen such desolation. I think we drove for a mile and there wasn't a building hardly standing.
Nobody knew what was going on. They called the situation fluid, but fluid means that nobody knew anything.
It was different. If I had done something else, I don't know what I would have done.